What if the most dangerous threat to Putin isn't NATO, it isn't sanctions, but it's his own ministers?
Alexei Navalny, Russia's leading opposition figure, has died.
Moscow all-girl punk band became a symbol of protest and opposition to President Putin.
In Russia, more than 1,000 people have joined protests over the arrest of an activist and a prominent Kremlin critic.
The Russian economy is reeling from the war in Ukraine. That's the word from the country's finance minister as Moscow's losses mount.
And most of who tried to dissent Putin's power in Russia did not get a chance to see it's happening. So, what's wrong with Russia?
At the 2025 St. Petersburg Forum, Russian economy minister Maxim Reshetnikov did something unheard of. He publicly warned of an impending recession and of the poor state of Russia's economy. He said this not behind closed doors, not in hushed tones, but in front of cameras and power brokers. What followed this confession was pure chaos. Almost immediately, other officials began scrambling to spin the story. Top bankers were contradicting each other, and Putin himself was brushing it all off as nonsense. What we're seeing is a rare moment where Putin is getting challenged, not by outsiders, but by those on the inside. In this video, we'll look at the chaos being unleashed by Russia's top officials and how this is affecting Putin's already weakening grip on power. When Putin's own inner circle starts speaking out, it means something big is happening. If you believe these critical moments deserve attention, hit like and subscribe. Your support helps these stories break through the silence and reach the world. We appreciate you. Let's start by rewinding to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, where the spark of rebellion was lit. This forum is Russia's largest annual gathering, where leaders, business tycoons, and foreign guests come together to discuss business. It's supposed to showcase the country's strength. But this time it turned into a stage for some uncomfortable truths. The person at the center of it was Maxim Reshetnikov, Russia's Minister of Economic Development. He's not some outsider critic. He's a part of Putin's cabinet, appointed to handle one of the most critical parts of the government. Reshetnikov has been in the role for a few years now, trying to navigate economic challenges amidst sanctions and the war. Unlike some Putin loyalists, Maxim has real experience, from regional governance to economics, which gives his warning extra weight. Additionally, before this, he served as governor of Perm Krai, where he dealt with local budgets and growth plans. This gave him hands-on experience with how policies affect everyday operations. That made his outburst that much more calculated. At the forum, Reshetnikov didn't hold back. He warned that Russia is on the verge of slipping into a recession. This analysis was based on current business sentiment and other indicators. He pointed to falling confidence among companies, saying that if things keep going this way, the economy could cool off too much and stall out. He even used the term economic hypothermia to describe it, like the whole system is getting chilled to the point where it might not recover easily. Reshetnikov blamed tight monetary policy for part of this. He argued that high interest rates are squeezing businesses too hard and making it tough for growth to continue. He said whether Russia slides into recession or not depends on quick changes. This includes loosening up policy that gives the economy some breathing room. He called for faster support to keep the slowdown from turning into something worse. And this came amid reports of slowing growth, with first quarter GDP in 2025 coming at just 1.4% year-on-year. And when you factor in that that number is likely an overestimation, the state of things gets even more desperate. But what's remarkable about all of this is that it wasn't an offhand comment in a private meeting. It happened in front of a crowd of elite Russians and international attendees, making it all the more striking. But why is telling this truth such a big deal? Because it directly goes against the Kremlin's main story. Putin and his team have been saying the economy is stable, even thriving in some ways, thanks to military spending and shifts to new markets. They've touted GDP growth figures like the 4.3% for 2024 as proof that sanctions aren't working. But Reshetnikov's warning paints a different picture. His truth reveals a picture where growth is slowing, confidence is dropping, and the risk of contraction is real. He's essentially saying that Putin is lying and masking deeper issues. For a cabinet minister to say this publicly suggests the problems are too big to ignore anymore, even if it means risking Putin's displeasure. It also ties into broader concerns, like how Russia's wartime spending is starting to cause problems. Other parts of the economy that aren't related to defense are having a hard time keeping up, and it's tanking the economy. As if in union with the rebellion, even other top Putin officials echoed the same warnings. One of the key voices was Elvira Nebiulina, the head of Russia's central bank. She's been in charge for over a decade, steering monetary policy through crises like the 2014 sanctions and now the current war. She's known for being super careful with money and always keeps her eyes on stopping prices from rising too fast. At the St. Petersburg Forum in 2025, she didn't hold back. She warned that Russia's recent economic boost, driven by war spending and short-term fixes, had run out of steam. Factories were hitting limits, money was getting tight, and workers were stretched thin. In her words, the tools that once kept growth alive were no longer enough. This wasn't just about slowing numbers, it was about a system running out of fuel. She made it clear that the country couldn't keep relying on the same tricks. She pushed for a new plan, something stronger and more stable, to replace the temporary lift that the war spending had gave. Her tone didn't sound like someone supporting the status quo. It sounded like someone ringing alarm bells. Of course, not everyone agreed with these two, and that's where the real drama unfolded. Right there, at the same forum, other top officials pushed back, trying to downplay their concerns and stick to the party line. First was the Kremlin's finance minister Anton Siluanov, another heavyweight in Putin's economic team. He's the guy who watches over the country's budget, handles taxes, and decides how the money should be used. Siluanov has a long history in finance, starting from roles in the ministry back in the 1990s, and he's focused on building reserves to handle shocks. His main goal has always been to keep the economy stable, no matter what's going on around it. So when Reshetnikov gave his warning, Siluanov pushed back. He argued that the slowdown was expected, not alarming. In his view, the slowdown is nothing out of the ordinary. He pointed to new data showing Russia's GDP grew by about 1.5% in the first few months of 2025. That's slower than before, but he said it makes sense. The huge growth during the war can't last forever, and now things are settling down. That, he believes, was always going to happen, but Russia is ready. According to Siluanov, the country has built up enough reserves to deal with this shift. He also said they're reshaping the budget with the war in mind, putting defense first, but still trying to manage everything else responsibly. Herman Gref and Andrei Kostin didn't exactly agree with the warnings from Maxim Reshetnikov and Elvira Nebeulina either. Gref, who heads Sberbank, admitted the economy was facing what he called a perfect storm. He pointed to high interest rates, rising inflation, and a strong ruble as major problems. He said these were hurting company profits and made it harder for businesses to borrow money. Gref also argued that the ruble was too strong and suggested it should be trading at over 100 to the dollar, not the current rate around 78. That, he said, would help exporters and ease pressure on the budget. He nibbled on his words, trying to make a bad situation look manageable. Kostin, the CEO of VTB Bank, took a slightly different tone. He didn't see signs of a full-blown recession, but did say the economy was icing or freezing. He used weather metaphors to soften the message, but still admitted that expensive credit was making things tough for businesses. Kostin also said that military spending was driving inflation, and that some industries were struggling because their products weren't reaching the market. He pushed for restructuring, and warned that keeping inefficient sectors alive would only make things worse. So while they didn't outright deny the problems, both Gref and Kostin tried to steer the conversation away from panic. Their responses were more cautious than optimistic, but they clearly didn't share the same level of concern as Reshetnikov and Nebeulina. Or maybe they were just careful not to incur Putin's wrath. This back and forth happened in panels and discussions at the forum, with all these officials sparring in front of the audience. It was an embarrassing moment for Moscow's image, because events like this are meant to project unity and confidence to the nation. Instead, it highlighted division at the top, with the economy minister sounding the alarm while other financial chiefs tried to calm things down. The tension wasn't just about numbers, it was about different goals. Reshetnikov wants to push for growth and avoid a recession. Nebeulina, who runs the central bank, is more focused on keeping inflation under control. Siluanov, on the other hand, is trying to keep the budget balanced as prices and costs keep rising. But the real issue beneath all of this is bigger. It's about whether Putin's economic plan can actually hold together much longer. It's the kind of division that signals deeper cracks, not just policy disputes. For a team meant to project unity, these public arguments show deep cracks in leadership. To understand why this differing consensus on the economy even matters, we need to dig into what's really going on with Russia's economy. Frankly put, the Kremlin has a collapsing economy on its hands. Inflation has been a big problem, running at around 10% in recent times. This eats away at people's savings and makes everyday costs higher, from food to utilities. The central bank has been fighting this with high interest rates, which have been hovering at around 20% this year. That's still punishingly high, making loans expensive for businesses and consumers. All this has the effect of slowing down investment and spending. The GDP growth is lagging too. Projections for 2025 are around 1 to 2%, well below the government's target of 2.5%. That's a sharp drop from the 4.3% in 2024, showing the momentum from military spending is fading. For 2026, forecasts suggest around 1.5% growth. with inflation expected to fall to 6.8%. But only if policies stay tight. Major banks inside Russia are starting to sound the alarm too. Take Sberbank, which is the country's biggest lender. They've warned that investment is slowing down because interest rates are too high and no one knows what's coming next. They're worried that if this all keeps going, more people and more businesses won't be able to pay back their loans. As you might imagine, this could cause serious trouble for the banking system. Some experts are even saying that if nothing changes, the entire system could face a crisis within a year. Already, more loans are going unpaid, both from companies and regular people. War costs and sanctions are now hitting banks directly, not just consumers. In some industries, unpaid loans have jumped by 15%. Outside groups are noticing the problems too. Reports include ones funded by the EU, showing that the economy is more fragile than it looks. Russia is still leaning heavily on oil exports, but those are getting harder and harder to sell because of price caps and boycotts. Oil income dropped by 20% in the first part of 2025 compared to last year, so the government had to start using its savings to cover the gap. That savings account, called the National Wealth Fund, has already been cut in half since the invasion began, dropping to about $166.8 billion by July of 2025. With government spending still high and the deficit now at 3.8% of GDP, the pressure is growing fast. These problems aren't happening by accident. They're all tied to the pressure from the war and the sanctions that followed it. Military spending has kept Russia's economy growing for a while, and this year it has reached 6% of the country's total output. Naturally, that kind of spending comes with side effects. It caused the economy to overheat, pulling workers into army jobs or defense factories and leaving fewer people for everything else. On paper, unemployment looks low at 2.5%, but that's partly because so many people have shifted around. In some industries, wages have shot up by as much as 10% just to keep workers. However, that has its own problems. You see, that kind of pay jump pushes prices even higher, adding more heat to inflation. At the same time, businesses are struggling to keep up. They can't get the parts or the technology they used to import from the West, which means factories aren't working as efficiently as before. In the first half of 2025, industrial production only grew by 2%, which is low for a country trying to act like everything is fine. To fill the gaps, Russia started importing more, but that also drained its foreign currency savings. So while the government talks like everything is moving forward, the economy is actually wobbling. The disagreements between top officials like Reshetnikov, Nabiullina, and Siluanov aren't just different opinions. They show real cracks in the system, where pushing for war is starting to fight against the need to keep things stable. That's why more voices are starting to call for deeper changes. Looking beyond this one event, there are more signs that Putin's inner circle is starting to fray. It's not just economic talk. Some ministers are quietly pushing back, even if it's subtle. Some ministers have started dropping hints about problems in their own departments. Transport officials, for example, have warned that roads and railways are falling apart because they don't have enough funding. This, however, has not sat well with Putin. Regional leaders say budgets are too tight to fix basic infrastructure. Widespread blackouts and rising electricity costs have added pressure. At the same time, outside reports from respected think tanks like the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute and studies from the EU say frustration is building among the elite. Business leaders are reportedly meeting behind closed doors, pushing for changes in government policy because the sanctions are cutting deep into their profits. Some reports suggest that these hidden losses add up to 35.7% of the country's total output, which is huge. The war isn't just dividing leaders either, it's dividing regular people too. Long-term surveys are starting to show that more and more Russians are questioning whether the conflict is worth the price. This is especially true now that everyday life is getting harder and harder, and money is tighter. All of this is happening at the same time as a wave of purges and growing instability across Russia's leadership. Over the past year, Putin has been shaking up key positions, starting with the removal of Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu in May of 2024. Shoigu wasn't pushed aside entirely. He was moved to a new job as Secretary of the Security Council, but several of his deputies didn't get off so lightly. A string of arrests followed, with at least 6 top military officials detained since late April 2024 for things like bribery and poor management. Another of them, Timur Ivanov, a deputy defense minister, was accused of taking millions in bribes. Another, Yuri Kuznetsov, was caught with piles of cash and gold hidden away, showing just how big the corruption problem really is. And the purge didn't stop there. More names were added to the list, like Ivan Populovsky and Grigory Zorin from military offices, and generals such as Vadim Shamerin and Vladimir Verteletsky. It even spread to regional politics. Governors and local officials were sacked or arrested, including people like former deputy Maxim Igorov, who was taken into custody. All of this has created a deep sense of fear in the government. The arrest continued well into late 2024, with Major General Mirza Mirzayev picked up in November. By then, more than 10 generals and top officials had been charged with fraud or corruption. And as if that wasn't enough, there have been a string of strange and unsettling deaths among the elite, which have shaken those at the top even more. Ever since the war escalated, high-profile figures have been dying under mysterious circumstances. One of the most shocking was Roman Starovoyt, the former transport minister. He was found dead in his car from a gunshot wound just hours after being fired by Putin in July of this year. Authorities said it was a suicide, but the timing has raised a lot of questions. Around the same time, Andrei Badalov, a vice president at the state oil pipeline company Transneft, fell from his apartment window in Moscow, adding to a growing list of similar incidents. It has become a pattern for senior executives and officials to die in strange ways. In March of 2024, Vitaly Robertus, a vice president at Lukoil, was found dead in his office with no official cause released. Some say the turning point came with the 2023 plane crash that killed Yevgeny Prigozhin. But the deaths haven't stopped since then. Irina Podnosova, a top judge and once a classmate of Putin, died in 2025 after what was called an illness, though there were some quiet rumors of foul play. Other cases involve oligarchs and businessmen dying in odd ways. Some of them were found hanged, others in strange accidents, with no clear explanations. At least 13 high-ranking officials and executives have died like this since the war began. That's a huge number for such mysterious deaths. Because of all that, it has created a chilling atmosphere where many of the elite feel like they are constantly at risk, no matter how loyal they think they are. So you see, it's not just about economics anymore. There's a growing mood of fear in Putin's circle. The Purges are meant to clean house and show strength, but they're also revealing paranoia at the top. Officials are expected to toe the line without question, promoting the idea that Russia is winning on all fronts. Any deviation gets punished harshly, whether through arrest, demotion, or worse, defenestration. Yet, despite this, Reshetnikov spoke out anyway. Why would he do that? Some speculate it's pressure from business elites who are suffering and want changes to avoid collapse, as profits in non-defense sectors have been dropping by 20%. Others think he's trying to protect himself by aligning with reality before it's too late, given the slowing growth. Or maybe it's a genuine concern that the economy is heading off a cliff, with forecasts showing stagnation if rates don't ease. Whatever the reason, it shows that the cost of loyalty is getting higher, and not everyone is willing to pay it blindly. The elite are increasingly anxious, with some fleeing abroad or hiding assets as outflows reached billions despite controls. Serving under Putin has always been a careful balancing act, but now it's more dangerous than ever. Public officials are expected to repeat the Kremlin's upbeat message, even when the facts tell a different story. That's why this moment with Reshetnikov stands out. It isn't just a disagreement. It chips away at the foundation of Putin's rule, which is built on the idea that his leadership is strong, united, and steady. For more than 20 years, Putin has tried to show that he's the one holding the country together, with everyone around him moving in the same direction. But public disagreements like this show that the image is starting to crack. The economy isn't as strong as it seems. War spending has pushed it too far, causing inflation and serious labor shortages. Right now, key sectors are short by around 2 million workers. These kinds of problems make it clear that the country's leaders are no longer on the same page. Economic decisions are turning into fights over deeper questions, like whether the war can even be maintained as it eats up more than 10 trillion rubles every year. And more than anything, it shows that fear might not be enough to keep people quiet forever. By the middle of 2025, surveys showed that 40% of Russians were already losing faith in the war, which could be a sign that more cracks are coming. If Putin can't keep his ministers in line on something as public as the economy, how much longer can he hold the whole country together? That's the question this raises, and it echoes through Moscow's power corridors. The regime has survived challenges before, but each crack weakens the armor a bit more. Business elites are fleeing or hiding assets abroad, with billions flowing out despite these controls. The brain drain continues, with almost 1 million skilled workers leaving since 2022. And international pressure, like tighter sanctions on oil and gas, keeps squeezing revenues. As it stands, Russia's meager revenue is projected to fall another 10% by 2026. The war has cost Russia dearly, not just in lives and money, but in the trust that holds the system together. As more officials see the writing on the wall, the pushback might grow. From quiet lobbying to bolder statements. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't the end of the Kremlin yet, but it could be the start of a major unraveling. The strongman myth is fading under the weight of these internal challenges, and what comes next could reshape Russia and its place in the world. The elite's growing unease, combined with economic headwinds, might force tough choices ahead, whether that's scaling back ambitions or risking more instability. For now, Reshetnikov's words serve as a stark reminder that even the most controlled systems have their breaking points.